play right, cause they can't miss. All about the game, that's a Colts wish. Serving up the truth, call it ruthless. Tune in and get your fix from Blake and Vish Sports.
DeForest Buckner says that he was willing to take less money to stay with the 49ers. He felt like the 49ers didn't offer him anything comparable to the 4 years, $84 million contract that he ultimately ended up signing with the Indianapolis Colts. We know DeForest Buckner is a great player. We know he's a consummate professional, consummate leader, and he was drafted by the 49ers. Blake, what was your big takeaway from his comments, and what is your overall outlook on the DeForest Buckner trade?
Yeah, so I really totally get this from the Niners standpoint. Honestly, but I think this was one of the rare sort of win-win trades where I think both sides got what they were looking for. The Niners were a little cap strapped and they had other guys they needed to sign or wanted to sign. So they went and got a pick, a first rounder, which ended up being Kinlaw, who was there to replace him, who was a lot cheaper, which I understand the methodology. I like that. And then the Colts, they're looking to win now. They thought that Buckner was worth a pick, and I would argue an all-pro D tackle is worth the 13th or 14th pick in the draft. They signed him to a big deal, and he's kind of the cornerstone defensive player along with Darius Leonard for them. So both sides of that, I agree. I think him saying he was willing to take less money shows how much he thought or how much he believed in the Niners organization going forward. It's kind of that, this has been done with Tom Brady's done this. You hear about it. He takes less money to stay on a team because he wants to be more competitive. He wants to win. I view that what Tom Brady did the same way of what Buckner was doing, thinking, hey, I was just part of one of the best defenses in the league. I'm going to stay here and continue, doing what I've been doing. And so I think that's really, really good sign of, praise for the Niners in the sense that he wanted to do that. But my big question that I kind of have been wondering about, and I'm interested to hear what you say, is if the Niners didn't trade Buckner and they paid him, let's say 18 or 19 million a year for 4 years, do you think they would be all in with Garoppolo, or do you still think they would have made the move for Trey Lance?
Yeah, I think the quarterback situation is honestly individual.
Okay.
I don't think it has a lot to do with this. I think at some point you looked at the contracts. The 49ers couldn't have continued paying Garoppolo the price that they pay him for the level of play they were getting, especially if they had a DeForest Buckner, because I don't think DeForest Buckner getting paid would have affected the impending contract of Fred Warner ultimately getting paid. Trent Williams ultimately getting paid. Nick Bosa is going to be up after this year. That's going to be a $30 million a year type contract. So I do think that the Niners, if Garoppolo's play continued at the same trend, which it has continued at that same kind of average level, they did need to get cheaper at the quarterback position because they needed better value for the play level of play they were getting. So to me, there was no doubt that I think that the Niners would have ended up trading for a quarterback or acquiring something different at quarterback at some point over the next 2 years, whether they kept Buckner or not. Honestly, I'm not surprised that Buckner was willing to take less money to stay with the 49ers. They're the team that drafted him. DeForest Buckner seems like the type of guy that wants to play for one organization his entire career. I don't think he missed a start as a 49er. He was a very, very good player. He's been a very good player for the Colts. He's an all-pro level player. I'm a little surprised that he seemed to come across as feeling, or at least the way his comments were reported, was that the Niners didn't even make the effort to try and find a middle ground with him. He felt like they were just kind of set on either he takes way less money or he just gets traded, which to me, him sounding like that is a little bit shocking because obviously, again, DeForest Buckner, excellent player. You don't need me to tell you that. Everybody knows that. So you would think that the Niners would make a huge effort to keep him, but it didn't seem like they did. But honestly, my biggest takeaway is I still think they made the right move trading DeForest Buckner. I have kind of a weird take on the idea of analytical value and how much each position should get paid versus paying players. In my opinion, the best players should always get paid. If your best player is a fullback, then pay your best player the top of the line fullback money. I know you shouldn't want to play fullbacks, but your best player is valuable because you're going to build a good offensive coaching staff, and a good coaching staff in general is going to build their system around their best players' strengths. So it doesn't matter if your best player is an off-ball linebacker, and off-ball linebackers, according to some, don't have value, or a running back, right? Like the Titans, Derrick Henry's contract looks good. Nick Chubb's contract looks good. I mean, Christian McCaffrey's contract when he's healthy it's still a bargain. Todd Gurley's contract was one where his health gave in, but Zeke Elliott's contract, is more or less Zeke Elliott, especially this year with this production getting back. He's more or less kind of lived up to around the production of his contract. So I do think you should pay your best players regardless of positional value, but I also do think there is somewhat of a value chart for it. Like, you can't pay every running back. Not every running back can be paid top of the line. Not every quarterback can be paid top of the line. And when it comes to 3 techniques or 5 techniques or interior defensive linemen in general, and Buckner's a 3 technique, I don't think you should pay a 3 technique unless his name is Aaron Donald. I just feel like you can generate interior pressures in a lot of different ways in the NFL. I don't think Buckner was the best fit for the wide 9. I mean, he's a 289-pound defensive lineman. With the larger run gaps, wide 9, you would ideally like a guy like Kinlaw that can just take on double teams and be immovable, bigger, 320-pound defensive linemen that are built lower to the ground. Buckner was a little more Highland pass rusher. Buckner, phenomenal all-around player. But to me, from when you factor in all of those things, and then you factor in the fact that you had to pay a 3 technique, $20 million, which is what the Colts paid him. And like you said, it's been an absolute win for the Colts. He's been sensational. He was an all-pro last year. This year, the stats don't bear out how well he's played, but he's been very impactful. They just haven't had the edge presence. They missed Justin Houston from last year, and that's affected his numbers. But overall, I still think the Niners made the correct move. Now, Javon Kinlaw's career, how it turns out, that'll be a conversation that will ultimately dictate whether it was a good move for the Niners. But the logic that goes into making the decision, I mean, you never want to trade a franchise-type player, and that's what DeForest Buckner was from the moment he was drafted 7th overall for the 49ers. But when you take out emotions and take out the intangible aspects of it, and you just look at the tangibles, to me, it was a sound trade. They got a very high-value pick, 13th pick in the draft, and I think it's a win for both teams, and I think it's a win for the player too, because I think Buckner's a better fit for the way the Colts front is set up rather than to play in the wide 9 for the 49ers.
Definitely. So yeah, I mean, he said he was willing to take less money, so he would have liked to stay, and you can't help but think the defense would be better, obviously, with Buckner than Kinlaw, because he's just that much better of a player now. Is it worth the additional $15 million a year, roughly? Assuming Kinlaw makes $5 million, I don't even know. That might be over guessing how much he makes. But a rookie contract versus $21 million a year, is it worth it to have Kinlaw and then some more players, or just Buckner? I don't know. And especially with the team that seems a little cap strapped right now. I know you could say that probably about like 25 teams, but it is true with the Niners when you have Kittle, when you have Warner, when you have Jimmy G making a lot. Like, that's 3 guys right there that are making, some of them like top 3 at their respective positions.
Yeah, and I the way I originally viewed the Buckner trade, to be honest with you, as much as I was a big fan of Javon Kinlaw before the draft, he has not been the player, at least so far. I mean, injuries have played a role, but 1.5 years into Javon Kinlaw's career, he's not the player that I thought he would become. So I'm trending towards being wrong there at this exact moment, but. I was a big fan of Javon Kinlaw, but I do think the Niners were a little bit disingenuous in the fact of you trade DeForest Buckner and then you immediately go draft his replacement 14th overall and give him DeForest Buckner's number. Then it looks like you're trading Buckner for Kinlaw. And I think that's where the discourse of this is, where people are real upset, because obviously Javon Kinlaw is looking like he's never going to be the player DeForest Buckner is, even if he's a very good player. I mean, DeForest Buckner is an all-pro player. He's one of the best players in the NFL at his position. He's a top 3 or 4 3 technique in football. So when you're talking like that, no, it doesn't seem like Kinlaw can get to that. And so I think that's where it's a little bit up in the air. I think that's where, teams like New England, when they trade a star player, that's why they trade down. They try and accumulate assets, so you're not putting pressure on one individual to replace that star player that you traded. So I'm with you there. I think that one for one kind of deal is what makes the 49ers look a little bad. You know, when they first traded Buckner, honestly, I thought it was an opportunity to retool this team. Instead of being so invested in their front four, instead of spending so much money in their defensive line, I thought now you save 20 million and now you get a premium corner. So now you have Nick Bosa in a premium corner rather than Nick Bosa, DeForest Buckner, and two guys who aren't the best corners in football starting. So I thought they would do something like that. I mean, the Niners have stayed with their philosophy. They just went for a cheaper option, which is interesting. It adds more to this discourse.
Mhm.
But honestly, I still think that trading to Forrest Buckner was the correct move.
Yeah, definitely. So, either way, the Kinlaw and Buckner comparisons are fair or not will always kind of follow them. Both of these players, which is kind of unfortunate because I feel like you should more look at, what you got in return and not what it came out to be. Like if you traded Buckner for 2 first overall picks and those 2 first overall picks were busts, you'd still do that trade 100 times out of 100, even though the players didn't turn out what you wanted to be, because that's 2 first overall picks. That's one of the, most biggest assets in the NFL. But yeah, that's not going to ever happen most likely. But that's the Buckner trade.